Welcome. We are so happy to have you here today for what I'm going to call the 150th anniversary of TCU edition of Against All Odds. My name is Hetty Richardson. I am the interim dean of the Neely School of Business, and I'm very pleased to be here to welcome you. I will give you, just up front, I will tell you, I have to go to another meeting. And so I'm very sad, and I will have to run out that door after I hand the mic over. But you are in, I think, for a very big treat today. So for those of you who have not been here, this is Against All Odds. It is a series that is designed for really everybody, for students, faculty, staff, alumni, and special guests. Today of which I see lots of people from the university as a whole, but we also have several of our Neely Board of Advisors here today too. So happy to have all of you here. And of course, Against All Odds is, and I'm told I have to stand in the middle of this gray carpet, and I'm not very good at that. I like to move around while I talk, so I'm trying to pay attention to that. But Against All Odds is we call it stories of grit and determination. And if you think about it, and it's meant to elevate the voices of diverse business leaders. If you think about it, right, we all face obstacles. We all have to be resilient. We all have to exhibit grit and determination. So I think the wonderful thing about this series is there really is something for everybody. It's not when do we have to face these things. It's not if we have to face these things. It's when we have to face them. And this, one of the reasons I'm so sad I'm not going to be here is because I have learned something that I've been able to take away with me at every single one of these. I think you are too. Going to learn something important today, and I will just say I have had the pleasure of getting about halfway through the book for our speaker today, and it's really outstanding. And I know we have copies for everyone, so please make sure that you pick up one of those copies before you leave today. So the last time I did this, I forgot the whole most important part of me standing up here, which was to thank the people who helped make it happen. And so today I have my little list to make sure I do not forget to thank anybody who helped make this happen. And of course, we most have to thank Bank of America, who is the sponsor of our Against All Odds series. And also, they power a lot of our access initiatives. So really appreciative to Bank of America. Thank you. And then I also have to thank the TCU 150th committee they are the ones that connected us with Tara Jaye Frank, and they are the ones who made these books available to all of you that you can take with you today. So I know Tracy was a part of that. I don't know who else was a part of it, but if you were in the room and you were, thank you so much. We are very appreciative of that. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't thank the TCU trustees and university leadership who have been so supportive of this event and who I am always thrilled to see sitting in this audience every time I introduce one of these. So thank you for that as well, too. Yes, clap. Clap for university leadership. And so now I'm going to hand you over to the very capable hands of Ann Tasby. She is our director of Neely's Office of Inclusive Excellence. She's also an instructor in the Department of Accounting, and we are so very fortunate and blessed to have Ann.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to everyone that is here in the audience. When we talk about sponsorship, it's so critical to what we do, particularly around inclusive excellence. And I am just delighted that we timed this just so that we have our Bank of America leadership here to just say a few words to give us a perspective on why they chose to partner with us on inclusive excellence.
At Bank of America, what drives us every day is to help make the financial lives better for everyone in our communities, for our clients, and for our associates. And for me, TCU is my community. So I'm a two-time Neely graduate, undergrad and MBA, and so having that impact here is especially important for me. But here in Tarrant County, it's what drives us and what makes us come to work every day. So about 4 years ago, when we really started getting into the pandemic, Bank of America made a $1.25 billion commitment to promoting access and equality and equity in many number of ways, whether it's from a home ownership and access standpoint, or health and human services perspective, or it's in the form of access to jobs, access to economic mobility, helping folks climb the ladder. And that's a big part of what we're doing here today and why we chose to sponsor this great program at TCU and help to foster that community. Hear stories of success. Hear stories of that grit and determination that we talked about as people climb that path. And so we're so excited to be a part of what's going on here at TCU and helping the TCU community and the students within that climb that ladder and set their path to, wow, here we go. My time is up here.
I didn't do that on purpose.
So anyway, I don't want to keep you from your speakers any longer, but thank you all for being here, and we're so happy to be a part of this.
So now you're in for an incredible treat, so I will not stand between you and that conversation. But what I would like to do is introduce our speakers for today. Now, for some of you, I'm introducing you to this incredible moderator. For others, he's just part of our family. So Ron Parker, trustee, TCU alum, TCU football legend, NFL legend. He's also been involved at TCU leading our $1 billion campaign to help fund initiatives that serve our students. And I'm happy to report that we just celebrated success in that area. So kudos, Ron, and thank you for being here. Next, I want to introduce to you our amazing speaker, the author of the books that you actually have access to today, Tara Jaye Frank. She's an incredible leader that brings to the stage not just a corporate perspective, but one as an entrepreneur and also as an advisor to CEOs across the country from the Fortune 500 companies. And so I'm just excited to have Tara here to share with us in this, our 150th celebration against all odds.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon and to continue to punctuate the 150th sesquicentennial celebration. I can say that. Thank you, Tracy, for helping me out and coaching me. But let me also recognize our vice chancellors who are also here, because Tara and I know this, that when leaders take the time to join programs and experiences on campus, it says a lot about the leadership. And I just want our chancellors to please stand up of the different departments: communications, HR, student affairs. Thank you. As well as our investor relations. Thank you very much for being a part of this. So, as Ann mentioned, we're going to have a conversation with a leader whom I've had the pleasure of knowing for, probably 20 years. She has worked with me in a number of different ways by just being a friend, a coach, an advisor to CEOs, has helped us when I was with another organization, the Executive Leadership Council, in our strategy of really growing the organization. She has tapped into constructs like institutes to help the next generation of leaders by imparting and sharing her wisdom and knowledge and experience to the next generation of leaders. And we're just going to talk about that entire journey that this very talented person is going to share with you, and leave ourselves some time to really hear from you, questions that you may have about what she has experienced, what she is seeing today, but more importantly, what she is anticipating tomorrow. She, in some circles within the private sector, is viewed as a futurist, where she has this unique ability to see around corners. I know Vice Chancellor Toll would love to have that as one of her key, just to anticipate how the students react on our campus, but you can learn some of that from Tara. So with that, Ann, again, let me just say thank you. Let me get my notes here. And I would say on behalf of the board and all of the department heads, we want to thank you for what you guys have just done in completing our lead on a campaign for TCU, as well as celebrating and acknowledging the 150 years of great academic excellence, but more importantly, be a part of the next 150 years that we are shaping for this wonderful university. So against all odds, our Office of Inclusive Excellence, thank you, Bank of America. By the way, I know your board chair, Lionel Knoll. Both Tara and I know your board chair, Lionel Knoll, very, very well. I have pictures in case. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a conversation. And Tara, if we could, let's talk about basically, since we have students, we have professors, we have leaders of the university here, let's start off by really hearing from you your personal history of where's home, what kind of family infrastructure early on in your career that I think helped shape you to become a student at Spelman. But give us a little bit of personal insights on Tara Jaye Frank.
Well, thank you. Thank you, first of all, Ron, for connecting me with the wonderful team here that has brought me here with all of you today. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for showing up. I know time is at a premium these days, so I don't take any of this lightly. To ask me to tell you about my origin story is really dangerous, so I'm going to try to be succinct in doing that. I'm actually from New Bedford, Massachusetts, and I don't know how many of you have been to that part of the country, but New Bedford is very small, kind of near Cape Cod. I am a Cape Verdean American. The Cape Verde Islands are off the west coast of Africa. My grandparents were born there. And so my family had not been in the United States for very long, right? My parents were pretty much first generation born in the United States. We grew up in a really insular community, just meaning almost everybody was an immigrant or from an immigrant family. Our cultural norms were very strong. We celebrated things that were not the same as everybody else celebrated. So I grew up in just a really, I'll say, supportive, loving, tight-knit family and community. But I always felt just a little bit different. And what I mean by that is I was always just curious about kind of what was beyond that horizon, right, that we could all see. I always wanted to know more about other people who were not like me. I always wanted to know more about how to connect dots that I hadn't even yet, been given visibility to. So pretty early on, I started thinking just about where else I might want to go. And I don't know how many of you remember A Different World, the spinoff of The Cosby Show, but many of us who attended HBCUs during that time did so because we were inspired, quite frankly, by A Different World and the campus life that was kind of represented in that particular sitcom. So I started doing my little digging and I ended up at Spelman College. And for those of you who don't know, Spelman is a historically black women's college in Atlanta, Georgia. Often, rated the #1 HBCU. I mean, I'm just saying that, I'm saying that's what they say, is that it's the #1 HBCU. So amazing experience, right? Because I went from being in a really tight-knit family to a place where everybody there was black, young, female, and a high achiever. And the reason this is important is because in the work I do now, right, and when you're the only in a given workplace environment or you're one of very few, it's really hard for you to be an individual. People see you as a representative of those who are like you, right? When we have very few data points, we tend to extrapolate those data points onto other people. When we have many data points, we individualize that data. So going to Spelman, where I was one young black woman of 1,200, gave me an opportunity to truly be an individual, right? To be creative Tara and quirky Tara and shy Tara and love to watch soap opera Tara and all those other things that really made me kind of myself. And it fortified me as a thinker. It fortified me as a creative person. It fortified me as a citizen of the world. From which I would kind of go on to really understand a much broader landscape of humanity.
Very good. So with that said, you had the wonderful opportunity of being a intern for the organization that you actually went to work for full-time and ascended all the way up to one of the key roles as an officer within the organization. Tell me, how did you go about assessing that Hallmark was the right place for you to start your career journey? What were some of the things that you actually, for the students who are in the room, that you assessed of Hallmark to say, this is where I want to start to be and to discover who I am going to be as a professional?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you it was a strategic process. It was not. It was a passion-led journey for me. I wrote my first poem when I was 6 years old. Had my first poem published in the newspaper when I was 6 years old. So I've been writing for as long as I can remember. I wanted to be a greeting card writer at 14. At the time, if you're not going to be a greeting card writer for Hallmark, then what are you doing with your life? So that's the company that I really wanted to go to.
Greeting cards, though? Greeting cards?
I mean, you know, and it's interesting because people are like, how did you know that? That's so specific. Here's what I have come to understand about that in retrospect. As a child, I loved to draw, I loved to write, and I was always really curious about people's emotional lives. My mother would call that nosy, but I would like to say that I was really curious about people's emotional lives. Those three things, honestly, intersect, I believe, in that format in a really fascinating way. And so I had a sense for that at a young age, and that's the work that I wanted to do. So I ended up at Hallmark as a greeting card writer. I spent my first 2 years of my career writing greeting cards, and then things just kind of evolved from there.
And by the way, on that journey, you had the wonderful opportunity of interacting with some individuals that we have a high regard for as an academic institution, people like Dr. Maya Angelou, whom you were, I think, personally assigned to her to express her thoughts in some of the products that Hallmark actually produced. But you were asked by the senior team to form a particular unit, business unit inside of Hallmark. It was the, I think, the Multicultural
Center of Excellence.
Center of Excellence. Yeah. Tell us about, how did you get discovered to be the person to create this entity, this business entity inside of the organization?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily think about it as being discovered, because at that point, I was in an executive role. The executive role I had, I was the only one who played that particular role. So it's not like I was an executive of one of many, many business units. I led all of creative writing and editorial for the entire company. So I was a known entity. I was working on business innovation right following that. You know, I went from kind of VP of creative writing and editorial to VP of business innovation. We were developing new consumer platforms for kids. And as part of that innovation process, we would come together once a month in a product review forum. And if any of you have ever been in product development, you know sometimes you kind of bring people together and do product reviews. And every time one of my peers would get up to kind of pitch their new product line or their new platform idea, there were 100 of us in the room weighing into that, right? And we would be weighing in on the viability, we would be weighing in on the quality of the insights, on the financial projections, anything you could possibly imagine. We were all there to help the ideas get better. And people noticed that I was always the person asking about the consumer. You know, well, who did you talk to? Who's really the consumer for this long term? Do we have a broad enough lens on the needs? How deeply do we understand them? What do you know, and how do you know that you know what you know? And so my questions often revolved around how America was changing and how we knew it would continue to change. So I think my boss was just basically, first she named me the multicultural champion, which was just the way of saying, you're asking all these really good questions anyway, let's just go on and legitimize that so people know that you're sanctioned to ask, to be all up in their business about these issues, which was pretty much what the role was. But it wasn't long after that that I think they recognized the value in thinking more broadly about the possibilities. And so I was asked to design and stand up a multicultural center of excellence. And it was an embedment organization, right? It wasn't just an internal organization. It was also helping all the consumer-facing divisions understand how America was changing, and then translate that understanding into viable, sustainable business solutions. So it was a translator role, it was an insight role, right? And it was also certainly an advocacy role. I led that organization for a couple years before I became corporate culture advisor to the president and the CEO.
Very good. So on that journey, as you are building this business portfolio within Hallmark, what were some of the things that you have later discovered that you were also experiencing as a professional, as a Black senior executive in Hallmark? What were you discovering about yourself during those years as well?
Yeah, you know, I think about this a lot because, of course, I've had my own business now for a little over 8 years. And as you know, I work mostly with C-suites to kind of better understand their workplace culture. I want to be specific, not what they say it is and not the rules we put in place to reinforce what we say, but what it actually is in the eyes of our employees. Because that's what I think our culture truly is, right? The norms, the choices we make, the behaviors we exhibit every single day. That's how people come to understand who we truly are, apart from, but sometimes reinforcing of, what we claim to be. So I've come to deeply understand that, I think, on another level. And I didn't think about that much at the time when I was inside the organization. What I did think a lot about is the degree to which we can serve consumers is contingent upon how broadly we see the problems, how deeply we understand them, how curious we are, right? How willing we are to challenge our own orthodoxies. We will only be as good as we are curious, brave, right, and diverse. And I knew that when I was inside at the time. And one of the factors there is I was in product development, so we were always doing focus groups. And I remember saying to one of my peers one time, you know, if you had a diverse team, you wouldn't always need to have focus groups. And he started laughing, but he knew I was right. I'm like, you're always trying to find out what people want, which means you're always gonna be behind the curve, because you can only ask people to tell you what they want when they've realized they're missing it. Instead, if you have a diverse workforce and you have a talent base that is living this life, right, and kind of understanding these realities in real time, you have an opportunity to see around the corner. You have an opportunity to be ahead of it. So my workforce and workplace passion was actually born out of a marketplace imperative. And I think that's what makes me a little different in the work I do, because I came to this through business leadership, not the other way around. They're all honorable, but that's just the way I came to it. And I think CEOs and C-suite leaders appreciate that because they know that I get many of the pressures that they're facing every day, and some of the trade-offs that have to be made.
Mm-hmm. Now you, because you've had such a outstanding career, let's pivot into, I know you had a tough decision to make to leave Hallmark for personal reasons, and we don't need to get into that, but because I really want the audience to...
It's in the book.
Yeah, it's in the book. But I really want them to hear you articulate that, having worked inside, also working outside, and what you are discovering from having both of those experiences in today's environment, and the feedback you give to some of the most powerful men and women in the industry. And let's just talk about it. Let's switch now to the Waymakers. The Waymaker came about and is written because of what? What were you thinking? What you had seen? What you had experienced? What created the energy and the focus for you to create a tool by which so many are using to transform their leadership styles?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I think you all know, especially now, there are so many books out there about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or some aspect of that. And for me, the more we can be exposed to, the better, right? It gives us an opportunity to form our own perspectives. But The Waymakers was written because when I thought about all the Black and brown people and the women who had risen to highest levels of aspiration. They were able to do that not just because of what they knew or what they had experienced or what they had achieved, but because someone made a way for them. This is not like a rocket science-y statement to make. We all know it's true ultimately. Each of us can reflect on our own careers, and if we ask ourselves, who made a way for me? Who gave me the unwritten rules, right? Who opened that door when I thought it was locked? Who introduced me to the decision maker for this particular position when I wouldn't have even been known to them otherwise? If we ask ourselves those questions, we can usually think about the person who made a way for us, the person or people who are our waymakers. And I realized that if we had more waymakers, if we had more people in the workplace who see it not only as their responsibility to make a way for others, but as their privilege to do so, and they were equipped to do it well, right? We might unlock more equitable outcomes. So the subtitle of the book is Clearing the Path to Workplace Equity with Competence and Confidence. And that's really intentional because sometimes people will say to me, you know, other Black people will say to me, Black leaders will say to me, Tara, they're not making progress because they don't want to, because they don't care. And sometimes that's true, but I have found that that's not always true. Sometimes people don't know what to do, that's the competence, or they don't have the skills or the insight, or they feel really uncertain about how to do it, and that's the confidence piece. They don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to step in it. This kind of work is a really difficult thing to get wrong, and we have to allow everyone in the conversation their humanity. If you feel ill-equipped to do something and you do not feel confident to do it, you're not going to do it. You're going to sit on the fence, right? And you're going to preserve whatever safety you believe you might have left. So the Waymakers was honestly my invitation for people who were sitting on the fence, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know what to do or how to do it, to get off the fence and get into the arena with us.
So say more, you said something earlier in a conversation with Ann and with Tracy about dilemmas versus solutions. Speak more to that model and what were your thoughts around how do you distinguish the two and might they complement each other?
Yeah, I think this is really important. A problem is something you can solve. A dilemma is something you must navigate. And we are doing lots of, I think, conflating right now problems with dilemmas with problems. Everybody wants things to be binary. It's a yes or it's a no. It's a good or it's a bad. It's a right or it's a wrong. It's an up or it's a down. And increasingly, those of you who are in business know that many of the issues we're dealing with right now are not binary. Their solutions are not binary. They are true dilemmas, right? And doing one thing too far this way is going to make somebody who sees it differently just as mad in that opposite direction. And this is tough stuff, right? And I think the wrong thing to do is feel paralyzed by it and do nothing, right? The only thing to do is to learn as much as you can about the issues, to be as curious as possible, to challenge or be willing to challenge your own assumptions or defining beliefs about the issues at play, and bring people in together to collaborate on a best possible path forward. And these are the things we're dealing with right now. I mean, there's no shortage of dilemmas.
Now you are speaking to creating relationships of trust. And you spoke earlier about being given the permission to fail. Talk more about how do those experiences add to the character of the individual?
Yeah, wow. I think you all generally know, but I'm gonna just lay it out to make it plain. When you do not feel psychologically safe in an organization, you don't take risks, you don't share your most creative ideas, you don't name the red flags or the potential issues to progress, you don't identify and raise the risks, you don't do any of that. What you do is you play it safe. You know, you're in preservation mode. I qualify that to my clients as the contribution gap, right? Sometimes when we create an environment where we tell people it is safe for you here, you know, you can be creative, you can speak up, you can take risks. We tell them all these things, and then they're in a meeting or a situation where they try to take a risk and they get their hand slapped or they get in trouble somehow. That's what, remember I said earlier about the choices and behaviors, that's what teaches them about the degree to which your organization is safe. Not what you say, but what happens to them when they risk. So then what we end up having is if I say something at here and I get my hand slapped right here, next time I go to risk, I'm gonna stop at right about here. Because I don't know exactly what I did to get my hand slapped. I don't know exactly what I said to get my hand slapped. And because I can't name it and clearly define it, I'm gonna back up off of it a little bit to make sure I stay safe. The distance between these 2 points, right, is lost business, right, lost growth, lost innovation, right, lost productivity. And we need to really understand that. So the way we create that safety is by collaborating on our cultural environments with the people who are having the most challenged experience.
Is this reflective feedback that you were talking about earlier?
Yes, to open the door.
See, I listened when you were talking.
I know, you did good. I'm so proud of you. Um, yeah, you know, opening ourselves up, again, to see ourselves the way other people see us. Let's just talk about human beings for a second. Like, we're talking about business, but this is a human condition issue right now. We don't really open ourselves up to understand the way we impact the people around us. I think we're afraid to do that because somebody might somehow challenge our idea of ourselves. And we can be more committed to our idea of ourselves than to actually doing good in the world.
But Tara, there are systems out there, compensation systems, communication systems, systems that are barriers that keep from us fully experiencing what you just talked. How do they factor into the dynamics of moving forward and really advancing innovation?
Well, they factor in hugely, obviously. I mean, I think we all know that. I think it's also important to realize that those systems, many of them were constructed for and by white men. That's not a knock on anyone, that's a factual statement. Many of the systems have been in existence for a really long time. And so they were designed for a certain kind of worker during a certain kind of era. And where we go wrong is when we never, ever question our systems or our policies because that's just the way we do things here. So it's the orthodoxies we end up running up against, right? Things we take for granted, systems by which we operate that we just don't question because we don't feel like we can. Sometimes we don't even think about questioning them. So when they, operate the way they always have, I think about it like a bullet train. Some of them are just inherently biased. And when we don't intervene, when we don't interrupt, they go at the speed they've always gone, they pick up the people they've always picked up, they pass by the people they've always passed by, they do what they've always done, right? So thinking about our workplaces differently requires a conscious intervention. And some of us aren't willing to take the time to do that. One of the biggest barriers to progress is people say, well, we just don't have time. We have this business to run. We have a lot to do. We need to meet our client demands. We got to get work done. And, I always say, yes, it's true that rethinking how you move forward is time consuming. I will also say that not thinking about how you move forward poses an even greater sustainability risk. And that's the part we don't always give our attention to.
So, Ed, how much time do we have left? Because I do want to get the audience involved. About 7 minutes?
7 minutes.
7 minutes, wow,
6
okay.
minutes and 53
Okay.
seconds.
Good. Okay, so as those of you who have a question, I'm not sure how you have a person who's going to hand the mic to them so you can get set. So let me ask, as we're doing that, Tara, can we talk about, is there a profile of a Waymaker? Are they 6'4", tall, dark, and handsome? Are they?
I wonder who you're talking about.
Are they 5'9" with glasses and professorial over here like Horatio Porter? Is there a profile? Can I see a Waymaker when I'm out there in the marketplace saying, that's a Waymaker?
You cannot see a Waymaker. You would notice a Waymaker by two things: by what they do and who they've helped. I define Waymakers as people with power and position who are willing and able to open doors of opportunity, remove barriers to progress, and usher people through to greater levels of contribution. Sometimes that comes in the form of insight, meaning I'm gonna tell you things you need to know that no one else is gonna tell you. Sometimes it comes in the form of access. I'm gonna open a door to a room that you should be sitting in that no one else has invited you to yet. Sometimes it comes in the form of opportunity. There's a huge, really important project that has a lot of visibility. I'm gonna get you on that project because if that goes well, things will go well for you. But that's who Waymakers are by what they do. What my business spends most time doing right now is informing and equipping all those other layers of leaders to lead all people well. So I'm gonna come back to that. The reason that's important is basically what you just described, but also let's pop back up to the top for a second. Sometimes we think that our declaration is sufficient, meaning I've told my entire organization that diversity, equity, and inclusion is important to me. This is a value. My leaders know this. If they do not operate in a way that aligns with that declaration, then shame on them and they don't belong here. We think that's enough, but when we do not equip people to do something well, we cannot hold them to that expectation. The example I shared with somebody, just kind of being silly, is one time, we have 6 children. And I had told one of our sons one time to do the dishes. I said clean the kitchen. Okay. I come back down later, there are dishes that have been washed, but they're on the sink, right? And he put a couple of them away, but not all of them away. When I went to look weeks later for a pan to bake a cake, I couldn't find it. It was in the most random place. I got so frustrated. Like, you don't know how to clean the kitchen. You don't put the things away. You put the thing in the wrong place. And I had to ask myself, have you ever clearly defined for him what great looks like? Have you equipped him to meet this expectation? The answer was no. I will tell you, inside many organizations, including some of the ones that I'm working with right now, they are expecting something from their leaders that they have never clearly defined, that they are not monitoring, and that they have not decided how they're either going to reward, remediate, or remove. That is an unreasonable expectation. So that's part of it. The companies that actually are cascading this down, they evaluate all their leaders, all of them, right? Through the lens of inclusion and equity, among other things, among other, attributes. And they know how they're gonna reward, remediate, and remove in accordance with those expectations. In the absence of that, we're kind of throwing something into the middle of a arena and just hoping people figure it out. They're not figuring it out. They don't know how to do it. They have just as little competence and confidence as the CEOs and the C-suite leaders I've worked with for years. Again, I said this to the group of students when we were together. This is a human question. It's not really a professional question or a workplace question, right? These are things that we deal with as human beings in any facet of our lives. And so I always like to go back there because sometimes we burden the workplace with issues that go far beyond the workplace. As a human being, when I have failed, right?
That's staff over there basically assessing our TCU culture, right? It's awesome.
All right. But as a human being, when I have failed, grace is really important. I also like to check my evidence, if that makes sense. Like sometimes we characterize failures inaccurately. We feel that something is a failure when really it was just a misstep or a mistake or a learning opportunity. So for me, some of it is mindset. If, however, the people around me are all pretty much like, yeah, that sucked, right? That you totally dropped that ball, that went completely south. I take every failure as a learning opportunity, after which I take a moment to collect myself. Failure hurts. It hurts most people. If anybody says to you, failure doesn't bother me, I kind of like, it might bother you. It might not bother you for long, but nobody likes to fail. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm gonna go get some failure. This sounds like a fun thing to do on a random Tuesday. You know, nobody likes that. So we kind of have to get with ourselves, but then I quickly try to shift to learning. What can I learn from this? What could I have done differently? Were there perspectives I didn't gather, right? Were there skills I didn't leverage?
It's reflective feedback that you were talking
Yeah, it's
about.
totally the reflective feedback thing. Because really, failure is just kind of a step towards success. You know, I'm not trying to use old adages on you, but that's the way I think about it. I'm not a failure. I may have failed, but I'm not a failure, right? So how do I do this differently or better next time? We talked about this, thank you for that question. We talked about this a little bit when we were in that space together with the students, and I said, you know, be careful about the stories you tell yourself. I would say also be careful about the stories you adopt as truth. So there are a lot of opinions people have about what's going to be possible for you, and many of those opinions will be informed by their experience, sometimes by research and, you know, good thinking, but also by their experience, right? So their experience doesn't necessarily have to be your experience. So I think you have to define success and happiness and contentment and all those things for yourself, first of all, and let that be your measuring stick, you know. And not be overly, I would say, paranoid about barriers. You should be informed by potential barriers, but not paranoid that you're going to step over one every single moment of the day. To the question about how have I become, let me tell you, I don't think about myself very much. I don't think, the way that you just described me, I don't describe myself that way. I don't think about myself much at all. I think about the work. I think about effective leadership. I think about cultural transformation. I think about safe and respectful and visible and valuable employee experiences. That's what I think about. And I think because I'm so focused on the outcomes and about creating as much capability in myself and around me as possible, it has allowed me to have a meaningful impact and make a difference in the places where I enter. And that's the way that I think about that. But thank you for the question. 3 things, you know, I talk about this in the Waymaker, but the 3 kind of steps on this path to change are 1, embrace realism, 2, take responsibility, and 3, build relationship. And it sounds really easy and simple, but what I mean by that is when I say embrace realism, I mean, you gotta really deeply understand what people are experiencing inside your culture or the environment that you lead. That's not the same as an engagement survey, right? An engagement survey will tell you how people feel. An experience survey will tell you why. And if you ask the right people and gather the right intersectional data and analyze that, you know, broadly, you will know the things that are happening in your organization that could potentially cause you problems. You'll also know really what to go address. And when we mend the deepest wound, we heal the body. So I always encourage people to start with those who are having the most difficult experience. So that's embrace realism. If we don't care enough to really know what people are experiencing, we will never be able to transform our cultures to work for everyone. The take responsibility piece of that is, no, this is your job to do. It's not the job of your HR business partner, though we love our HR business partners. It's not the job of your, you know, maybe 2-person DEI team. This is a leader's job. It is the leader's job to unleash talent fully, freely, and fairly. And we have to take that responsibility. And then the third, on the build relationship, again, at the end of the day, relationships still open doors to opportunity. You can have the best policies in the world, but policies are interpreted by people. People decide whether or not to abide by those policies and to what degree. So if we do not make connections across differences, if we do not bridge some of these chasms that are just growing wider by the day, if we don't get people to care more about those beyond their nose, we're not going to have people benefit from these practices or policies equitably. And one of the things that I use to describe this is something that I built, it's in the book too, called the affinity grid. It basically says, when I share affinity with you and I have high knowledge of your expertise and your aspiration, you have the highest advantage in any talent selection process. If I share no affinity with you and I don't know anything about what you've contributed or your aspiration, you are virtually invisible to me. I don't care what policy you have, that's gonna ring true. So the call to action for me as a leader is to get to know the people in my charge, because I might discover affinity where I didn't think it existed, but at the very least, I'm gonna come to understand your contributions, right, and your aspiration, and that gives you advantage that you did not have before.
And just to add to that, I mean, the Neely Promise is all about giving our students an experience to be curious about everything that they encounter. Because curiosity basically allows you to discover that which is real, that which could very well be an opportunity or a potential challenge for you. So curiosity would be one. I would also say you define yourself. You don't let others define you. Because that keeps you curious, to Tara's point, it keeps you grounded, to be centered. And there will be times when you're going to become so frustrated, whether you're at school or whether you're in your first job, not knowing where to go or to whom to talk to. You have to find that quiet space just to recenter yourself. Otherwise, you'll wake up and you won't know who you really are. And you will become an imposter. And the worst thing that we could create leaving this campus are imposters. Because you will never realize your true self if you're trying to be something for something else or some system that really doesn't know who you are and what you're capable of doing. And be true to yourself. I've reinvented myself so many times, I've lost count. One day I wake up, I want to be Horatio Porter. Next day I want to be Tracy Sowler Jones, you know. But in doing so, I find that aspect that is truly Ron Parker, and I said, that's me right there.
There are two things I'd like to say about that. If you're in a safe environment where you believe the leaders above you would actually hear you out, I always encourage people to set up 20 minutes with somebody toward the top of the house. It can't always be the CEO, depending on your company, but sometimes it can be. And just to have a conversation with them about the culture they really want to create and cultivate. Because the way I think about this is, who do we really want to be when we grow up? And then if you have insight or a perspective that helps them understand the degree to which they're succeeding at that, most leaders want to understand that. They want to know. This is who I want to be when I grow up. Am I being that person? How or how not, right? But when that's not possible, I think the next thing we can do is create a coalition of the willing. Meaning, who are the other leaders at your level or maybe just above you or even below you who see the world the way you see it, who want to create and cultivate the kinds of things you want to create and cultivate? And how can you band together, right, to try to increase the impact of the work that you want to do? So every time we feel like we're alone in the work and we behave as though we're alone in the work, it feels so overwhelming and that we're never going to get there. But there are always other people who feel the way you feel. We're just not having the conversations.
And if I can add to that, there's a lot of discussions around culture. Culture. Well, what is culture? To me, culture is a byproduct of norms, values, beliefs, practices, systems. Collectively, they create a culture. Now, all those things I just named, norms, values, beliefs, systems, they can be changed. They can be altered. They can be reshaped. They can be reassessed. But we think culture is this
Static thing.
This static thing that is out there and I can't control it. I can't influence it. I can't shape it. Again, it's just norms, what you do every day, values, what are important to you as an enterprise, beliefs that you want to see actually expressed, systems, compensation, communication, technology. Those are all things that we can shift and move to be a competitive advantage personally or as an organization or an entity.
I spent 21 years at Hallmark, Mahogany was born almost 10 years before I got there. But I was there during its peak. I also led the development of many of our other culturally specific lines. So I was there for Vita, I was there for Tree of Life, I was there for, I mean, the list goes on. I think it's really important because our lived experiences are unique, right? Our human experience is a shared experience. Our specific cultural experiences are unique. When it comes to products like that, especially where you're talking about emotional expression, the way people express themselves emotionally, the words they use, the concepts they draw on, right, the tone with which they express, all of that's going to be, I'll just say, dependent, right, on some of those cultural norms or cultural realities. And people don't really feel reflected if you don't get it right. So I think depending on the kind of work you do, culturally specific offerings make a ton of sense. They don't always, but I can tell you right now, to this day, when I go into a store, I'm not going to name any, I'm looking for the Black Santa Claus. That's what I'm looking for, right? Because I want it to reflect my family. So that's just kind of a simple example. And it's Christmas. Merry Christmas, everybody.
If I may ask this one question before Ann kind of closes us out here. Given where we are today and the tenor of the tone as it relates to wokeness, as it relates to inclusion, as it relates to the full appreciation of diversity, what would be the one or two things you would say to this room of Waymakers? You've just converted a whole auditorium here of Waymakers. What would you say needs to be done as we move forward, as we prepare for the next generation of leaders who will assume the mantle of leadership from those of us who pass it on as a senior Waymaker to a more junior Waymaker? What would you say are the things that we need to step into the moment and lean into?
I could give you a strategic answer, but I'm not going to. I feel like the single most important thing we can do for ourselves and each other moving forward is to build more bridges across differences. Our echo chambers are loud and comfy. When COVID hit, I think during that period when everybody was starting to refocus on what really mattered, we somehow hoped that we were going to have some kind of a reset. We didn't. We went back to our echo chambers, we fluffed the pillows, we made the bed, we swept the floor, and we settled in for a very long winter's nap. And it is, I believe, one of the most dangerous instincts that we've kind of fallen into. And I know it's self-protection, I understand that. But I think it's going to work against our potential. It's going to work against our healing. It's going to work against our growth. So I would say that. Build bridges across differences. It's not easy, but it's possible. And I think it'll pay dividends.
Tara, thank you so very much for spending the afternoon with the Horned Frog Nation. Thank you for being a part of Against All Odds.
Thank you.
Back to you, Ann.
Well,